Hey, what's up, Squanch Nation, Wisecrack Nation, every other nation and people out there? Welcome to this week's edition of The Squanch. Michael Burns, joined by producer Henry and Wisecrack director and visual master extraordinaire, Michael Luxembourg. We're here to talk about season 6, episode 8, called Analyze Piss, which is exciting for me, as Analyze This is just my favorite movie ever. Just you put Billy Crystal and you put Robert De Niro together and I'm good to go. But all jokes aside, we're here to talk about the episode. If you've had a chance to watch it, you'll enjoy this. If you have not watched it yet, we'll definitely spoil parts of it, so you could always come back and check this out later on VOD. And if you are wondering, where are the other episodes of The Squanch, there's a playlist. It's on our page. You can go check that out to check out past episodes. But let's just dive right into it. Lux, what were your initial thoughts on this episode, Analyze Piss?
I didn't despise it as much as I despised episode 1 of this segment of episodes. I guess episode 7. Wow. But I also didn't like it that much.
Okay. And let me ask you a little, and we won't dive in too much because we'll do that in a second, but in 300 words or less, what was it that you did not like about this episode?
I didn't think it had anything super interesting to say.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically like, did you know that people sometimes get milkshake ducked? And that is an uninteresting observation. And like the only thing that's funny about it is how much they talked about pee.
And Lux, for anyone who's not obsessively online, which might be no one here, can you briefly just define milkshake ducking?
Yeah, like sometimes people become very popular and then it is revealed that they in fact suck. And this episode plays with that in some kind of interesting ways, but never like enough or with enough clarity or focus to like make a particularly interesting observation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Beyond like, it happens sometimes.
Okay. Well, I'm curious. I'm surprised by that. I'm excited to dig into it. I'm surprised by that take. And if you're in the chat, please let us know what you think. We want to hear as well. Henry, what are your initial thoughts on this episode? Analyze Piss.
Found it funnier than last week's episode. Like Lux, though, I don't feel there's like a super coherent theme. There's some fun stuff going on with like the performative versus private self stuff, and just like the kind of rise and fall and contrast of Jerry as hero and Rick is villain that I found fun to yarn along with, and a lot of the piss jokes were funny and kind of gross that way. But I didn't find the episode as great as some of the others this season have been with like their ideas. It did make me rethink a lot of what they're doing with Jerry this season. I could talk more about that after we talk about spoilers and kind of what we're looking forward to with the rest of the season, though.
Yeah, I think I maybe liked it a little bit more than you all. What's up in the chat? Letter W, day 3 of microdose. Hope it's going fun. I think I liked it maybe a little bit more than y'all. You probably have seen this if you're watching the stream. We did a video on Jerry that came out a couple weeks ago because I think internally we've been thinking about this season's focus on Jerry, finding it kind of interesting, wanting to dive into what that means. I found it solid. Any episode of Rick and Morty that starts with a suicide warning, it made me a little bit skeptical almost that they were going to go too dark and not really pay off the darkness. I don't know if this episode did pay off the darkness. I found it visually fun at a few times. I thought Act 1 was stronger than Act 2. But I will say it's on the bottom third of this season for me. Sam in the chat says, is there any way to listen to previous Squanch episodes? Yeah, every episode we do on this is a video on demand. It's on a playlist on our YouTube page. So if you just go to VOD Squanch playlist, you'll see it right there. So I guess it's probably interesting that no one is in love with this episode, because often when we all really love it, it's harder to talk about. So let's do a quick summary. And then we'll get into it with a little more depth. If you're in the chat, feel free to share your thoughts on this as well. And, roast us or praise us for our takes if you agree with them. So this episode, like I said before, begins with a suicide warning, which lets you know something heavy is on the horizon. In the opening scene, our old friend Mr. Nimbus is back, who loves to fight with Rick. And we have an old-fashioned battle that involves Cookie Magneto. We're not sure if he controls the cookie ingredients or anything else. And at the end of the scene, Rick is really mad that a bunch of people want to keep fighting with him. That no matter what he does, people just want to seek him out. So Act 1 starts with him back in therapy with the therapist played by Susan Sarandon, an American treasure. We love her. And in therapy, Rick knows that he's a walking target for a sea of angry nerds that think that getting in a fight with him gives them a platform. After this, a guy named Pissmaster comes to the house and at the family dinner threatens to give Summer a golden shower. And Jerry says no more. And he beats the shit out of Pissmaster for sexualizing Summer. Two aliens from a committee from the galactic organization that thirsts for justice shows up, and they offer Jerry a place in their group. They give him a little orb. Rick makes a suit out of the orb, and he goes off to fight a bunch of space Hitlers. So Jerry becomes a hero both virally, and this gets back to Lux's milkshake duck point, for what he did to Pissmaster. Then he becomes a cosmic hero. Rick is back in therapy, realizing that not reacting is, quote, really the kill move. We soon find him then drinking at a space bar. People at the bar are looking at the video of Pissmaster, and someone at the bar is talking about how great he is. The bartender then says, "Who could relate being that much of a piece of shit?" Lets us know we're going into one of those Rick is sad episodes. He shows up at Pissmaster's house, who's in a hot tub who's in a bathtub because he killed himself. Rick tries to bring him back to life, doesn't work. Pissmaster's daughter shows up to apologize and make sure her dad is okay. Rick dresses up like him and promises he won't do anything bad. He then goes on a redemption mission where Rick makes an advanced Pissmaster suit, flies around the world, plans a hero's death for Pissmaster in which he plants a bomb on Orphan Island. As he's trying to get the bomb off of Orphan Island, Jerry has come to recruit Pissmaster to the Council of Justice. Eventually, Jerry stops him. Rick then lets Jerry and the whole family believe that he was Pissmaster the whole time so that he would prop up Jerry and make him feel confident, which makes people think that Rick is good. At the very end of the episode, Rick shows Morty Pissmaster's suicide note. Morty snitches to the family. Everyone is mad. And there you go. The tag has the Justice Council looking at some of our other friends, talking like agents about who they'll bring on the team. So there you go. That's the episode. I guess let's just dive in a little deeper then. So let's start with this. The episode begins with a suicide warning, which is important to have content warnings for stuff like that. I mean, what sort of expectations did that give y'all leading into the episode?
I thought that was going to be a lot more of the centerpiece of the episode, which I thought would have been very interesting.
Did you think it was going to be Rick that tried to kill himself?
I thought it was going to be someone. I didn't think it was going to be Rick, but I thought it could have been Rick. But I just thought it was going to be like first 5 minutes, there is a suicide, and that is sort of our kickoff hook point. Because like if you're going to like, at least to my mind, obviously like whatever, like that shit can be totally funny. It's totally fine, but like if you're going to do that, it feels like you want to hang your hat. If you're going to do something that's going to make you put a warning at the front of the episode, you maybe want to get a little bit more mileage out of it than I think the episode kind of does. But like, I mean, I think that's one of the things about the episode that kind of worked for me was like that element of the arc, like just all of that stuff. And I kind of wish it had more honed in on like that as like a catalyst that sort of affects all of these characters in various ways, as opposed to sort of being this like background detail.
Henry, how about you? And before Henry goes, I see some people in the chat talking about not seeing that warning. So yeah, all I know is here in the States, when it aired on Adult Swim, they had a little title card with the warning before the episode. So maybe that's different depending on how you watch the episode.
Yeah, it kind of slipped my mind by the end of the episode, partly because it wasn't as central as perhaps I was expecting with something as front-loaded as that. I was thinking it would be Rick, though, on first appearances.
Yeah. And then there's something that Rick says really early on in the episode. And I know we talk a lot about this show's propensity to go meta, explore meta themes, and even explore the show's relation to its own audience. So I'm curious what y'all thought was going on when Rick says at one point, and this is an almost exact quote, when he says that he's a walking target for a sea of angry nerds that think getting in a fight with him gives them a platform. I think there's a few ways to interpret that line. Did that stand out to either of y'all?
Yeah, I mean, that felt thesis statement-y. Like, that felt, like arranging sort of the subtext of what we're going to look at and like positioning us to analyze along those lines. So that was, I guess, effective. It's just like, again, to go back to like my complaint with this episode, just like I just don't care that much when stories are like, we have some thoughts about the way social media works, which is effectively what this episode was. And it's just like, it's a total not, it's like, I don't know. For me, this is definitely like a personal bias thing, but like, to me, it's like one of the most snoozers things you can talk about. And like,
just because it's so trite and well-worn territory, the idea that social media is a place where quote unquote angry nerds get in fights to get themselves platforms.
Yeah, exactly. And like that, there's all the most interesting things about social media discussions kind of like require a fair amount of like preamble and like establishing of terms and sort of, and like navigating through a lot of stuff to get to the juice. And like no 25-minute cartoon is going to do that. Right. Mm-hmm. Like, so like, as soon as they said that, I was just sort of like, oh, it's going to be the second new Halloween movie all over again. I don't know if you guys have watched that, but there's a big part in the middle of it where people are like, is the mob right to hate Michael Myers? Isn't the mob too crazy? And it's like, shut the fuck up. I don't care. And like, it was the same thing where it's like, it did get away from that. It did get into some fun stuff, which is nice, but it's just like that sort of positioned the thesis of the episode in such a way that I was just like, oof, gonna have a hard time making me give a shit.
Yeah, that felt like a fake out to me in the sense that like I'm very interested in cultural, like pop culture depictions of antagonism and kind of what we assume and attribute villainy to versus kind of the reality of how bad things happen in the real world. And it felt like the episode was going to do something with that from the opening and that line, just like the analog of like what we think supervillains are and like who annoys us in the real world and how we do scapegoat stuff. So it spoke to a certain idea I find really appealing, and then it didn't go back to that. So that was really frustrating to me with this episode.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there's some folks in the chat who are like, don't think it was about social media as much. And I think that would be right if it had done sort of more of what Henry was just talking about. If it had contextualized that within sort of other stuff, like questions of like villainy and what is and is not annoying and like how like figures in our lives are created and stuff. But like, it doesn't really, and it goes towards this Rick arc that is good, but if the Rick arc is going to be what the episode's about, it should be what the episode's about. And it gets kind of like, there's a weird timing balance with all of that stuff. Like we only get the Rick redemption story in like the back half of the episode.
Yeah, and I'm going to note a comment just so we can circle back to this later, but Progman3K says Rick's arc is no good deed going unpunished and people won't let you change. So I want to talk about that later when we get to the end of the episode, this notion that people won't let you change. For now, let's jump to Jerry. So we've talked about Jerry a lot this season. It's been a huge season for Jerry. We made a whole video about it. And again, we seem to see some type of Jerry growth, Jerry self-actualization, a time where Pissmaster is disrespecting Jerry's family, and rather than cowering in fear or letting Rick handle it, he goes and he handles it himself. There was also that part of me too, thinking about social media, and maybe this is my broken brain, that also thought of Pissmaster as like a troll trying to talk shit, but then someone actually comes out and like wants to throw fisticuffs, and then they're very scared and cowardly. But what do we think is going on with Jerry? Because in this episode, he goes from becoming a hero to his family, to a hero to the internet, to a hero for the literal galaxy. So is there meaning to this other than the episode or the show getting juice out of pushing Jerry in directions where we haven't seen him go before?
I mean, I do think it's like, there is some of this, to just go back to the no deed goes unpunished thing. There is some of that sauce here, in the sense of like, when Jerry does the kind of thing that Rick does all the time, it's really special and becomes a viral sensation because Jerry's a regular guy. And Rick is like, obviously Rick. And so it plays differently. And in fact, Rick's only ability to access that kind of joy and that kind of lauding is to disguise himself as a different dude entirely.
Yeah.
And so there is something to that, especially in terms of like drawing this distinction of like, it's one of those things where it's like pilots land planes all the time, but when a pilot passes out and a random guy on the plane lands the plane, everyone's like, oh, holy shit, that guy landed a plane. It's like, well, people are doing this all the time. And so there's something interesting about that for sure. It just like, yeah, to me, that's what it was mostly doing, was like contrasting their two relationships to the things that they do and like doing the outstanding stuff. And it does feel a little more of like, yeah, like Jerry, I don't think season 1 Jerry or season 2 or even season 3 Jerry would have done this, but we are seeing Jerry grow into a more active character in the narrative. And like, this definitely is reflecting that to a degree.
Yeah. Henry, what do you think about Jerry's arc in this episode and how it relates to his arc in the season as a whole, if you have thoughts?
Yeah, I liked seeing that the structures around him start lifting him up, and he's still fundamentally a dummy, but there's incentives and motivations in place to kind of get him to behave in a particular way. And it's making me wonder about this kind of compassion that's been there for Jerry this whole season, and if the season is kind of working towards this idea about society being as good as how it treats its like dumbest and its weakest. Yeah, it's having me kind of want to reevaluate this season's Jerry episodes based on that kind of a context.
Yeah, I saw some comments in the chat about Jerry's arc being over, not over, some saying that it's not. So I will be curious to see where we land with Jerry by the end of the season, because it seems like they wouldn't keep doing this if they weren't going someplace with it, and if they weren't trying to show us something, tell us something about Jerry and the role of the character in the season. Yeah, let's see. So yeah, Ryan in the chat says, we had seasons of Rick as the villain and Jerry working their way back into the family. Is this turnabout returning to a season 1 feel again? Smudge says, interesting to see Jerry and Rick have some strong antagonism after becoming friends. The letter W says, like the stream, everyone. Yes, just a reminder, if you're here and you don't hate it, please like the stream. It helps people see it, which helps us get to keep doing this. So thank you in advance for doing that. Thank you to the letter W for being, the pissmaster of all of our hearts. So thank you for that. I kind of want to jump to Act 2, unless there's anything else from the first half of the show anyone wants to hit or unpack.
I think I'm good.
Cool. So if anyone has therapy thoughts, we can talk about the therapy stuff. We've seen Rick in therapy before. To me, where the episode really got cooking was at the bar in space, where Rick goes from, I'm done, I'm finished, I'm out, in terms of being out of the game, out of this pattern of needing to prove himself by stepping up to any adversary that wants attention from him, to being out of his whiskey or whatever sort of space spirit that was. Then hearing someone say, who could relate, being that much of a piece of shit. And then we cut to Rick outside of the Pissmaster's house with a 6-pack, obviously showing us that Rick relates to being that much of a piece of shit. And this touches on things we've seen in previous seasons, where Rick relates to someone who is sad, who is desperate, who is pathetic. I think about the guy, and I forget the character's name, that snuck into Rick's toilet planet and was sad about missing his wife and stuff like that. And Rick ended up empathizing with him because he too was sad in that way. So I don't know. There's part of me that has always enjoyed some of the episodes and arcs where we get into Rick's psychology and see him for the depressed, sad man he is. But what do we think about his response to that comment, him showing up at Pissmaster's house, him finding Pissmaster dead? How did you all react to that? And what did you make of that? And as well, thank you so much, everyone, for liking the stream as we go. Really appreciate it.
I liked the finding Pissmaster being dead bit. Mm-hmm. That is, like you said, that is kind of where the episode like kicks off for me, like becomes a bit of a juicier piece of media, a little juicier piece of story, because Rick, the first half where it's like Jerry becoming a Green Lantern effectively, and like weird Marvel bits semi happening in the background, is fine. But I think that the strongest of the episode, like you're getting at, is this like how Rick relates to other pathetic people, and his desire to. So he like counter defines himself against other people, hassles people a lot. That's how he gets his rocks off. And seeing other people do that and kind of seeing those parallels and reacting to them does tell us a lot about him and is interesting. It's just like, I wish it happened way earlier in the episode. because I think there's so much to unpack there and so much fun stuff to play with there. And obviously, like, seeing Rick as fake Pissmaster was a blast, and getting more of that in would have been fun. So I think what happens is the thing that happens in a lot of Rick and Morty episodes, where it's trying to do a lot of things, and each individual thing on its own could have the sauce, but it's so spread out over the course of the episode that nothing totally comes together for me. And so it felt like he shows up, the guy's committed suicide, he's like having an existential crisis. I'm like, there's 12 minutes left in this episode. Like, this happened. There's not that much time left. Like, seems wrong to me.
Yeah, and then Sam in the chat, thanks for reminding us. It was Tony was the episode on the toilet planet. But I get what you're saying, Lux, and it feels like they could have done more with this, or even, would it have been more interesting if he does bring Pissmaster back and try to rehabilitate him or something like that, or if we got to see more interaction there between those two. But it seemed like that's where and Ryan agrees with Lux in the chat as well. Henry, what are your thoughts on Rick showing up at Pissmaster's house, what this says about him, what this is doing in the episode, etc.?
I felt like it was a second episode. It really did feel like a pretty hard break as far as setting up all the Jerry stuff and then switching over to the Rick stuff. I mean, the third act parallel stuff kind of makes sense as to why they went that route structurally, but I don't know. I'm still mulling over just like Rick at the door listening to Pissman's daughter and just sort of feeling like he needs to act instead of not reacting. It felt, I don't want to say uncharacteristically empathetic, but it felt like a strong turn of empathy for what it was. Or maybe I'm associating it with a stronger turn towards a more empathetic Rick than I feel the show's been hinting at before.
Yeah, I mean, it really feels like at that point, Rick is taking a level of responsibility for Pissmaster suicide, which in a sense can seem kind, I guess. In another sense, seems to imply a sort of narcissism, where Rick still sees it as something that he has done because, of course, he is the prime mover behind any real consequence and can't simply accept the fact that maybe Pissmaster suicide doesn't really have anything to do with him. Then him trying to, fix things for the daughter. Is this tapping into his feelings of inadequacy as a parent himself towards his own daughter and his original daughter? Who knows? Maybe.
Is he doing it to one-up Jerry because he's mad Jerry got that kill?
Maybe, right? Yeah.
There definitely is some God complex shit there in that respect, for sure.
Yeah.
I do think one telling line about Rick's turn towards empathy in this episode is when the therapist asks him if his weird plan to become Pissmaster, pretend to blow up a planet, and then save the planet by sacrificing himself and giving Pissmaster what is perceived as an honorable death is, quote, fun and freeing, then he should do it. And then he's sort of like, I didn't see that one coming, or whatever the line is. But I think that is, that part kind of illuminates what's happening here, which is that I think Rick is starting to find that there is value to him, like, as a person doing things for other people. But he obviously hasn't quite figured out how to do that yet, or how to do that in a healthy way yet, or how to maintain that consistently, right? That's the end of the episode with the suicide note is showing that Rick can make like 90% of the sacrifice to take care of everything for everyone, but he can't get all the way there because he just like doesn't know how yet.
Yeah, the suicide note thing was wild, the way that he kind of had to brag, but I did a good thing, and that Morty had to see it. He couldn't not show Morty, which is both him seemingly wanting attention for not being horrible or for doing something good, and also this inability to keep something in and not be seen, to not get attention for something like that. And even like an inability to not bring Morty down with him in a sense.
Yeah, he needed to share it with someone because otherwise he wouldn't get credit, but he misunderstands that the main thing for which he would get credit is to like bear the burden of this whole situation, sort of darker undertone. And instead he's like, I did the good thing, give me my cookie, which totally fair. Like, this is character growth, right? Like, it should be chunky in that way. Like, he gets part of the way there, but he fails the like final step and he needs to keep learning. That's totally fine. But that is sort of what happens to him in the episode, is that like he just cannot quite grok the necessary final step. Which is good. I think it's effective for the thing. But yeah, it is very much, as Ryan in the chat says, very much returning to TV normalcy. Like, that was like a necessary beat to keep things from getting too developed too quickly.
Which of course then gets into the question that we're always asking about this show is it just going to be a constantly escalating cycle of Rick veering out towards becoming better, more empathetic, more human, while Jerry gets braver and all this sort of stuff to only crash back down. And how much can they do that in a way that remains interesting? So, like, to Ryan's point there, it's the sort of thing that is probably true, but I wonder if that's the sort of thing that's ultimately going to continue to slowly suck juice out of the show. And Sam's talking about this in terms of BPD, borderline personality disorder. Sam, probably interesting. I'm not going to speak on that because I always want to be careful about speaking on mental illness and sort of psychiatric stuff when I am not an expert in that, but very interesting. Smudge has thoughts on Morty sharing it with the rest of the family. If anyone has those.
That's Morty, right? Like he's not gonna fucking
Morty's
he's not and he's not out here to like bear grand burdens.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's just kind of out here for the adventure, and he's out here because he's stuck in it, but he's not. Morty does not have this sort of broader sense of self that is like, I have to take on the weight of the world or prove myself in this way. He's just like a horny, weird teen. So of course, as soon as he gets the info, he's like, well, fuck this. Like, I'm not carrying this dark secret in my heart the rest of my life. Like, no way. I'm 12 or whatever. Fucking absolutely.
I like Matthew's comment in the chat, kind of like people who post about quitting the socials. And I do think that's an interesting comparison for Rick having to show his work that he did a good thing. The same way people, when they want to get off Twitter because of Musk or whatever it is these days, have to do it in a performative sense and don't just simply say like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, so I'm getting out.
Yeah, it is very Jordan. It is very Jordan Peterson being like, "This is my Twitter post about quitting Twitter."
Yeah. Oh no, 100%.
I do feel that it is. Speaking of Jordan Peterson, a cry for help on Rick's behalf, or less a cry for help, and him even in the most narcissistic way, like actually like opening up about things he's hiding more so than in the past.
And this is something. Isn't this something we kind of get like once a season or once every 2 seasons? Some overt Rick cry for help, a moment of fragility with Rick or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. A couple of things. We'll keep talking about this, but again, thanks for being here. Thanks for liking the stream if you did that. Like it if you haven't. Just reminders as always, we have a Patreon. You can check it out. I'm thinking about this because Sam mentioned the Discord, and you might have thought like, what Discord? Well, we have a Discord. You get it if you join our Patreon or if you subscribe to the YouTube channel. So consider checking those things out. Also, just a reminder, we make videos, so you can check them out. Today we put out a video on ethics and capitalism, and I'll give you all the exclusive download on the stream. I mentioned this on Wisecrack Live. Today's video was originally supposed to be for a sponsor, but the sponsor read the script and they said, no, this is too spicy for us. But it's not even that spicy, friends. We de-spiced it so much. We sucked all the spice out of it. We're like the people that called the Thai restaurant and said, yes, can we have our food with white spice level, please? But if the video at any point you're kind of like, oh, this is like an interesting kind of apropos nothing thing, it's a bad boy video because it made sponsors upset. So check that video out if you get a chance. And then we have a part 2 kind of to that video coming out later this week on Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX that gets a little bit deeper into things like effective altruism, long-termism, the philosophy around that, and the weird congruence of crypto capitalism and weird Oxford bro ethics. So, check those out. And if you're interested to hear more, someone said, Caleb said release the spicy cut when. We'll do a little, inside the director studio spicy cut.
We should
reveal later.
We should maybe do a behind the crack since I'm doing those now, where we talk about that particular video. Actually, that seems smart.
Yeah. We will do something like that soon.
Patreon
so
content.
100%. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. That's what we got going on the channel. Always good to let you all know. We have some fun stuff coming up on the other streams as well. We'll keep streaming the Squanch. Got some fun guests coming up on Wisecrack Live. If you don't catch Wisecrack Live or you don't check it out, normally it's Thursdays at 11. I'm always there. Henry's always there. We have some more guests coming on soon. So, you could check it out if you want. And Thornback, the sponsor, it was not established title. So there you go.
Yeah. Can I answer a thing from the chat really quick?
Yeah. Do it real quick.
So to clarify, Smudge asks, so Rick equals a dick for sharing, but Morty equals good for sharing. It's not a question of good or bad per se. It's a question of the things that they're after, right? Like Rick wants to be wants to become good and be given credit for being good. But like Summer points out, the truly good thing would be to carry the weight of that knowledge rather than put it onto the family. Morty has no dog in this fight. And so he has, he just doesn't, it's not a thing about which he's accountable or to which he is accountable. He doesn't give a shit about this. He has no desire to be the good guy. So it's not a good or bad thing, but it is consistent with where they're both at that they would behave in this kind of way. And I'm less judgmental of Morty for sharing it because Morty made no pretense of being the good dude, or like desiring the credit for being good in that way. Whereas Rick very transparently did. So that's to flesh out that particular distinction.
Oh, very solid. Thanks for answering that. So that's an important question. I didn't see that one. So let's get to the part that everyone loves, where we reduce a team's creative work of collaboration trying to make an episode of TV that's meaningful to us by giving it the type of grade you would give a 3-page argumentative essay in 8th grade. We're going to grade the episode now. We encourage you in the chat to do this as well. We use an A through F scale with pluses and minuses in case you're wondering what scale we're on here. Henry, let's start with you. What is our grade for this week's episode?
I feel inclined to say C-, although I feel that messes with my consistency across the board. I may need to reevaluate this season, but
wow.
It was funnier than last week's, but I feel like last week's was a funner rewatch. So, I mean, yeah, it's something about this one just sits at a C- for me.
Is the C- for you to do with the fact that you don't feel like it has a coherent through line, or that the episode isn't doing one thing in a clear and effective way?
Yeah. There's a lack of clarity of intent. Hearing about, for instance, like the whole narcissism debate going on with the ending, though, is making me kind of reevaluate that maybe I just approached it with the wrong kind of like notions in mind.
Yeah. Oh man, we're getting some early grades in the chat, and we've got A's, B's, C's, a lot of diversity of interpretation here, which is maybe fun. Lux, how about you? It is time to give this episode a grade.
I would also give this a C-, actually.
Whoa.
To go back to Smudge, who I guess I'm just answering nonstop by mistake right now. This really was an episode about the limits of the 20-minute like sitcom format, right? Like this is like when you have a student who's giving you your 3-page argumentative essay, but they accidentally need 6 pages to make their argument.
Did feel like a compressed screenplay.
Yeah, exactly. Everything becomes condensed and squished and sort of shoved around. And I think that sort of hurts the episode across the board, which is a problem because like there is a lot of interesting stuff. They could have gone social media stuff and therapy stuff as a connection. They could have gone Rick's relation to success versus perception as a direction. They could have gone to Jerry's sort of milkshake ducking as a direction. These are all things that could have been whole ass episodes of Rick and Morty, and we've seen them do whole episodes on less dense ideas. But instead, they shove a bunch of dense ideas in there. None of them get the love and sort of cook time that they deserve, and everything comes back sort of raw and gooey in the center, and you send it back to the kitchen. I've been watching a lot of Gordon Ramsay lately. But yeah, like that's what you end up with. And it sucks because I do think there's sort of chunks in here that I'm really into, but just the gestalt is not there for me.
God. Now y'all make me want to change my grade. I'll stick to what I was going to say before you all gave your grades, because I'm, if nothing, a man of honor and consistency.
The integrity is unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Flying out of the room with the pure force of honor and justice coming off of the stream.
I have an orb of honor. I piss justice. I'm going to say B-. B- because I didn't think the show or the episode really focused on one of the interesting ideas and saw them all the way through. However, visually, I thought it was a really good episode. There was a lot of fun jokes that I liked, and it did at least open up interesting doors and interesting aspects of character. So, oh yeah. And then Vasco says no love for Mitsubishi. Why can I not say that word? Mitsubishi. As a Mitsubishi man, I really respect it too. So yeah, I think there was a lot of good stuff there. It didn't land it. If we're going to use Gordon Ramsay, descriptions here, I would say it's like a dish where a lot of the elements on the dish on their own were pretty tasty, but they didn't come together in a way to make the plate of food sing harmoniously or something like that.
Yes.
That with a British accent, and I'm saying fucking piss and shit. So that's where it is.
Donut. He's so funny, that guy. Oh my god.
Yeah, and I do think that Interstellar Surfer says this amazing. The writers comment on a bunch of nerds using Rick as a platform, and these bunch of nerds play it off as nothing. I think we're the bunch of nerds in that.
Yeah, they should have, if they wanted the bunch of nerds to analyze that bit, they should have done it better. Like, here's the thing is there wasn't a lot of what it means that people do that, right? It's just like something Rick has to deal with, and it doesn't really comment on or interact with those nerds in particular.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of the thing, right? There's not a lot to say about what it means that people use Rick as a platform, because it's all about Rick's existence as a guy who is used as a platform, right? If we'd spent more time with the fake Marvel dudes who are all around, then maybe there'd be a lot more sort of me and Burns and Henry looking in the mirror being like, is it bad that we do this? Like that definitely was like on the table with the episode to make it explicitly about folks like us. Like, we are the Cookie Magneto and we are like Pissmaster in that story. It just doesn't do a lot of adding depth to those and is much more concerned with Rick himself and Rick's position RE that. I would have loved it if it were more dense in that way. I thought it was going to be more dense in that way, and I thought there'd be a bunch of shitty, weird heroes doofing off, and it would be sort of about what it is to be a huge show that is like latched onto and has its sort of own industry attached to it. But it goes off in a very different direction than that, which is fine.
Yeah.
But
well, and I do think what the episode's getting at with that joke a little bit is that there's a vapidity or an emptiness at the heart of the people that do want to, use Rick as a platform, that they're nothing other than that negative relation. And I think that's a thing that Rick's exploring. So I don't know. We exist pretty heartily outside of that negative relation. We just do this a couple times a year when there's episodes. So that's fine. But fair question, Interstellar Surfer, and great username. And Caleb Scott, to stick with our food stuff, says it's like they make these pizzas where every slice has a different flavor so they can fit the whole story in one cycle. 3-minute mini episodes for every stage of the story circle. Ryan says the end of episode tags have sucked bad lately too. Wow. Here we go. And Smudge says, I feel like you guys are more descriptive than prescriptive nerds. Thank you so much.
yes,
I think that works.
just like Michel Foucault.
Just
Very
like
flattering.
him. Well, I think that's all for this episode. Any final thoughts, Henry or Lux, things we didn't get into today about this episode, Analyze Piss?
I'm looking forward to if the Jerry stuff that's been running all season culminates in something big.
Same.
Yeah.
I'm definitely on Jerry watch. Anything else you want to throw down about this one, Lux?
Can I ISO for 45 seconds on how much I hated the first episode of the season?
Very quickly, but yes.
Oh my god. You can't make a TV show episode that is meta jokes are annoying and bad and do nothing but meta jokes that aren't interesting. Like it drove me the fucking Joseph Campbell shows up and is just like, did you know there's a million stories? It drove me.
Joseph Campbell, voiced by Dan Harmon as well. Meta on meta.
Yeah, it drove me up the fucking wall. And I think sometimes the show is really good at poking fun at meta stuff, but I think it just went so way too hard and just had no fucking sauce and no real direction to it aside from, there's a good core idea in it. There's when he says like, I want to make something good, and then Rick is like, or Morty says there's no good or bad, there's only joyful or joyless. That's a great concept. I love that. I tattoo that on my chest. But like, there's nothing else with that episode that plays in that direction, that messes with those concepts in any real way, and doesn't really problematize this idea of good and bad, except for in that one moment. And if they'd wanted to make the episode about that one moment, I would have loved it. But they just went off in all these other directions that just didn't do shit for me. An endless stream of puns and like inside baseball TV shit. And even as someone who has written on shows that use all this dumb language and works on that shit, it sucks and it doesn't land and it's just boring as hell.
Wow. There we go. Vasco says Lux doesn't like no sauce, and Ryan said they made this episode because of y'all. You can't convince me otherwise. Amazing. And I'll be excited to see when we get to the end of this half of the season what Lux's overall analytic is. But thank you so much again for hanging out with us on this edition of the Squanch. We'll be back next week. I think we're going to start doing this just, I know everyone wants to keep this on their calendars. It's really important to you. I kid. We're going to do it at noon Pacific time on Mondays from here on out. So if you're setting a reminder, that's when we'll be doing it. Thanks as well for liking this stream. If you didn't like it, feel free to do that. You still can. Check out today's video on ethics and capitals. Be on the lookout for Friday's video, which is going to be pretty spicy. And come hang out on Thursday, Wisecrack Live, 11 to 1 Pacific time. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun stream this week. I feel it. We got Patreon. We got all this stuff. So there you go. I'll read Dr. Mann's comment. Says, Rick took over Pissmaster's persona in order to bring out a better ending to his life, just as he has taken over another Rick's family in order to bring about a more satisfying end to his own. Thornback, tell us how you really feel, though, towards Lux.
I like that one.
Yeah. And thanks as always to the chat. You all are the best. So much good stuff happening there today. Know that if we read every good comment in the chat, this would be a 4-hour stream just reading the chat. And you don't want that. But thank you so much to Lux. We're so glad he was back this week. Thank you to producer Henry. As always, give Lux and Henry some love in the chat. Ryan, I'm glad you avoided work with us. Even though this is work, it also does feel like avoiding work. And we'll be back next week. So thank you so much, everyone.
Later, yo.
Happy squanching.